firstly, if no one's paying attention, which they weren't, then light a fire. But on the flip side, the mask goes up and you're in defense mode that whole time.
It's genuinely one of the things that keeps me up at night.
I think they're the three things that you need to balance out. If you go too far on one, then the whole thing is going to fall over.
Hello and welcome back to the Growth Distillery for 2024, where we are starting the year off with a very special mini-series in partnership with the Marketing Academy. I'm joined by Will. Will is going to come and have a chat to us about the unfiltered self. So we're going to be speaking to some of Australia's emerging marketing and media professionals. They've been handpicked by our friends over at the Marketing Academy. And Will, I had a quick look into you over the weekend. Try not to do too much because this is all about exploring underneath the hood. But for those that don't know Will, the National Director of Sport and Entertainment at the Publicis Groupe. But Will's had an illustrious career, 11 years at Optus across 8 roles, meteoric rise through a big telco company, but recently a jump from client to agency. But that's the A side. What I'd love to know in your words, from your perspective, is what's the B side to that? What's the story of Will, cradle to grave, 140 characters or less, for those that are listening in?
Straight in, huh?
It's a good jump off point.
Sure. Well, thanks, Dan, for having us.
You're very welcome.
I think I was telling you before, it's my first podcast, so be kind. But a pretty good question to start with because I know myself better than most people.
Well, you know.
So yeah, cradle to grave. Let's start. I'm a husband.
Yep.
10 years married to Jess as my wife.
Great name.
Yep. I believe that's your wife's name as well. I'm also a father. I've got a 2.5-year-old daughter called Naya. Beautiful, beautiful girl. Been a great 2.5 years with her in our lives. I'm Sydney, born and raised, spent my whole life here, born into a big Greek family, first son, first grandson. So I was quite spoilt, but I was also quite alone as well growing up. When you're the eldest, you're watching the rest of them come through, right?
Yep.
So you kind of set in the
path.
Yeah. So Greek family. My father was a entertainer, so he was in a band. He was an MC at weddings. So there's a bit of that entertainment kind of side to me, I guess, that I grasp onto a bit.
Yep.
So yeah, went to school in Sydney. My school life wasn't, I guess, the most memorable. Had a bit of a tough school upbringing, mainly because I had a speech impediment growing up, which hopefully won't come through.
Yeah, wow. Nothing noticeable at this point.
And I was quite overweight as well going through school, so I didn't have the best time at school. So that kind of, we'll talk about later about confidence.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of impacted my confidence a bit. But, I think you'll find I was always pushing myself. So I worked in a video store. So for those who are old enough to remember what a video store is, I was recommending videos every day, a bit like Netflix does now. I then DJ'd at weddings. It was a great chance for me to be working with my dad, who was an MC. So spent loads of times around weddings and entertainment, and always had a passion for that side of thing, as well as sport and for marketing as well. So I think through that, I just managed to find a way to bring those two passion points together to get where I am today.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my
you were
B-side.
the original Netflix algorithm.
I was, yeah.
So I think if there were one or two things that you think you've brought with you from that backdrop into your professional career, you mentioned confidence, but confidence being one. Are there a couple more that you think you've really brought into your professional career in terms of the unfiltered version of yourself?
I think my values have really come through. If I think about what got me through school, like I went to a public school, so I was always a pretty hardworking family as well. So my parents always taught me about being a good person and respecting other people, and I think that's really come through in where I am today.
What do you think makes a great leader?
A great leader, there's many things. I mean, for me to say that would mean I think I'm a great leader, and I'm still working on myself. But I think being really authentic, being able to, I guess, have the skills to get those in your team to bring their whole self to work. And I think to do that, you really need to open up
Mm.
And as a leader, you need to model the behavior that you want to see from others. And I think if you do that, that's a pretty good start. And if you just try it day to day, you'll see you do small things and then you watch your team start to mirror and start to feel a bit more confident. I think that's what generates trust and respect, which are really important pillars of leadership.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree. Why do you think so many of us struggle bringing our whole selves to work? Because I fundamentally agree. I think that you get the best out of your people, not only when they're bringing their whole selves, but to your point, you've got to give them permission to by really walking the talk on that. But, so many of us feel the need to mask, this fallacy of there's a work will and there's a home will. I wonder, first I'd love your perspective on how you go, like why that is and how you go about diffusing that amongst the people that you lead.
I mean, it's something I still battle with every day, and I think you mentioned I moved from client side to agency side. You don't walk into a new role with a mask on, but I think you do have your guard up and you're looking for those cues in the workplace from your manager, from those around you, from your team to allow you to drop your guard. And I think sometimes, you walk into an environment and it's just like everyone's so driven by the work and by the outcomes that they forget about the human side and the connection. And I think when that happens and your leader's not leaning in, asking you questions, getting to know you, I think that's where you mirror and the mask goes up and you're in defense mode that whole time. When you're going for interviews, I think that's another time when people get it wrong. They go to an interview with just work. These are all my achievements. And then you realize as you get older, that's only a small piece of what the business is looking for.
Are there any tips or tricks that you'd recommend to those listening in around how you can get your team to unfilter?
There's a few different things you can try. I mean, I've been quite lucky to go through the Marketing Academy program last year, and they taught us a few of the different tools that you can do. And unmasking, which is the topic of this podcast, is an exercise that you can do with your team. And it does require you to build a real safe space, firstly. And you just get you just give everyone 10 minutes, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's in a team, just to get people to open up and talk about their lives, who they are, the pivotal moments in their life that shape them. What they're really happy about with their lives and the challenges that they're having. I think just through that exercise, you get a really good insight into your team and what makes them tick. And when you know that, I think it just builds a really good team culture.
In your mind, are there any myths or misconceptions that you think are most damaging to marketing and media professionals?
This might be one of mine, but I think it's like the eagerness to have to go out there and brand yourself or to, I guess, try and package up who you are through things like LinkedIn and other things like that make you seem like you're someone that you're not. And I think we fall into the trap a bit, even when we're learning about how to present and learning how to do interviews and things like this, that you're getting trained on how to, almost to the point where you're no longer yourself. And so I guess it just starts to generate this behavior that maybe I need to be like that certain archetype in order to be a leader.
It's genuinely one of the things that keeps me up at night as a dad of young kids, this idea that we're looking at ourselves through these tiny little apertures, right? A LinkedIn profile or, whatever the social outlet might be. But it flattens that identity, and there's such a richness that I think we discount. And I think you talk to something really profound, which is we start to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit and buy into that projection of ourselves. From your perspective, then, if you're noticing that someone in your team is really struggling or grappling with that identity crisis of who they might be versus who they feel as though they need to project, what's your approach to try to bring that unfiltered version of themselves forward?
It's quite difficult in that you want to respect their privacy, and you're almost taking on a role of a leader and a manager and a friend and a psychologist.
Do you feel as though that the lines have kind of blurred in the last few years, particularly sort of post-pandemic, where great leaders, you've had to wear all of these hats?
I think so. I mean, I used to have, I've had leaders in the past who, I've got this really funny story of a leader who sat me down and just said, I want to know the real Will. Like, he said to me, take your kimono off, who are you? Yeah. And I was like, no, mate. I was like, I'm not telling you, my deepest, darkest, secrets and all these things. I'm like, why don't you tell me yours, And, I was in my mid-20s at the time. And at first I was like, I don't know why I need to tell you everything about me. I wanted to, but I felt like he had to go first.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
And do you feel as though now that you've got a couple more runs on the board, albeit still a spring chicken, that you're a little bit more comfortable with that? You know, if you were to have that same conversation with that leader now, do you think your response would be different?
I think so. I think it would be. And I think naturally I like to play the role of a mentor. So I do get people naturally coming to me, whether it's at work or out of work, in my team, out of my team, asking for advice. And I don't know what it is, but my wife tells me I'm someone that they can trust, and my approach. But yeah, true. I think my approach, having empathy, really want to understand why I start to walk in other people's shoes, get people to open up. It does get quite hard sometimes. The emotions sometimes do really come out, and that's where you think to yourself, "Shit, I got myself into a kind of sticky situation here where I can't provide all the help that this person needs." But as you get older, you start to figure out what those avenues might be.
You touched on something that I'm quite passionate about. You mentioned mentorship. And I think that there's two sides to this I'd love to cover off. The first is mentorship in your professional career. I'm a strong believer that exceptional leaders, lean on the people around them, right? The mentorship plays a huge role in the professional careers. We're not on an island, so to speak. I'd love to understand the role that mentorship and peer support have played in your career, from beginning to end, or how that's transitioned, and then sort of the A side to that, and then part B being then how have you paid that forward, and how do you go about supporting not necessarily your direct reports, but those that might approach you, to your point, and say, "Look, Will, I'd love some guidance."
Mentorship for me, I kind of had quite a bit of it at the start, and then I had a big gap in the middle of my career, and I've picked it up again recently. So the last 12 months, I was lucky enough to have 8 different mentors, which again just reminded me of how powerful it is. And my biggest value is walking in other people's shoes, and I always seek to understand what it's like from their perspective, and that's what the mentors give to me. I really like they've walked in my shoes. They've got the experience that I may not have. They give you perspective. I think is really, really important, especially when you're at your darkest times, to have someone to say, "I've been there, look at where I am now. This is some tips and tricks of how to get yourself out of it." I think it's really important that I had one mentor who after the session said to me, "I'm not sure if that was really valuable. That was just me talking the whole time." And I said, "No, that's the point. The mentoring is actually about the mentor. Coaching's about me." So early in my career, it was, I had some pretty good mentors, but I was young, and they gave me tips around career advice, like things like keep on putting stuff in your kit bag, keep on doing projects, put your hand up, do things that other people don't want to do. And that got me to a certain point. Now the mentoring is more about, that how you bring the balance, to work. As I said before, father, husband, my own health and well-being, my work. So how do you balance it all out as you try and aspire to be, a leader?
Yeah. We're going to get to balance or whether or not balance is, again, another one of those professional fallacies. But I think for those that might not have such a fertile, paddock, so to speak, of mentors, how do you go about finding great mentors? How have you found finding mentorship?
I did have a gap. So I did actually struggle to find a mentor for a bit of time. And I think that's one of the confidence things I spoke about earlier, is having the courage to reach out to people and ask for their time. I'm very generous with my time, but for whatever reason, I feel like it might not get reciprocated. And that's just me, my own head, right? Just thinking that people are too busy and don't have time. But I reach out to people. I reached out to someone last week who I respected that I met before. I said, "I'd love to have, 45 minutes of your time just to chat about where I'm at."
Yeah.
And it was great.
It's funny that we put these blocks, and you're not Robinson Crusoe in that. The thing that I hear most, particularly from emerging leaders, is, but no one's going to make the time for me. But from my experience, and I'd love to see if yours is similar. People are broadly generous with their time. I think we underestimate the kindness and compassion of professionals, particularly great leaders. That if it's someone that you've gravitated towards, surely there's something there where they're not going to cast you out. But yeah, I find it interesting that we put up these blocks, and often it stops us from growing as professionals.
Yeah, I've never knocked back anyone who's asked for time. Yeah. So I just keep on reminding myself of that, and you just got to be authentic. Like, why do you want their time? don't make it feel like there's a catch or a gotcha. You're trying to get something out of it that they're not. Like you go for a 1 hour chat and then you ask for a job. Those
Not
kinds
really
of
a
things.
mentor
It's not
conversation,
really.
is
It's
it?
not really an authentic mentor conversation.
How do you define an exceptionally successful mentor relationship? Like, what are the ingredients of something that's really humming when it comes to a mentor-mentee?
Mentors, they've got to be really good listeners and ask all the right questions. So I think they're probably two really
Easily
key
said,
things.
very difficult.
Very
to do.
difficult.
Yeah.
I do it. You jump in. I'm doing it now. You jump in and you want to talk about your experiences and your stories. So it is hard.
You mentioned that the role of mentorship has shifted. From your experience, have there been any points in your career where mentorship has been particularly important and particularly beneficial?
I had a couple of mentors last year where I was having, it's been a pretty pivotal 12 to 18 months from a home perspective, and I was just sharing with them some of the challenges that I'm going through, trying to balance work with, some of those other challenges. And the mentor straight off the bat, like, just came out straight away and just said, "Let me tell you a bit about my experiences in this space." And you just realize, actually, everyone, no matter who they are, no matter how senior that person is, we're all just people just dealing with the same stuff every day. Some a lot worse, but at the end of the day, there was just being able to share stories, I think, is what makes it a real powerful mentor.
Yeah, as you meant, you're not Robinson Crusoe when it comes to, going through trials and tribulations. It seems to be the human condition, and it's those that think that they're, that everything's sunshine and rainbows that are often, overlooking the things that are holding them back.
Yeah, I mean, and I had quite a few mentors who said I got the balance wrong, and I just all work, and I've lost connection with my kids, and I lost connection with myself, and it's almost too late now, and their advice is, and we'll talk about it later, is get the balance right and be conscious about where you're at. It's okay to lean into one or the other as long as you do it consciously.
We've mentioned it a couple of times. We'd be remiss not to cover this off. Is work-life balance, can work-life balance be found, or is that in itself a fallacy?
It depends how you want to describe work-life balance. Some people say it's the amount of time you spend in the office versus the amount of time you spend at home. I think it's a mindset.
Okay.
Right?
Go deeper.
I do. I think you don't have to always be on at work. As in talking about work. Like, I'll talk to my team about the weekend, about how things were, about our families, about sport, funnily enough. So it doesn't have to be all. I think that in itself helps provide the right mindset that you're kind of carrying at work. I think the balance side of things, I always like to look at it as there's actually 3 parts to the balance, not 2. It's like work, life. I think you got work, and your life's split into 2. You got your family, all those people around you, and then you got yourself. So we learned it as the me, the we, and the it. Right? And the it being work, the me being my health and well-being, and the we being my family. And I think they're the 3 things that you need to balance out. If you go too far on one, then the whole thing is going to fall over. You might invest too much time in work, and then the next thing you realize, you haven't been keeping yourself fit and healthy. So if you're not keeping an eye on those things, it's all going to come crumbling down.
And I like the fact that that you've introduced a third that we often overlook, and it's often the place that we need to start, which is ourselves. I'd love to explore that a little bit more. You've skirted around self-management, and I'd love to get under the hood of that if you're comfortable around, as the pressure mounts, right? As the table stakes have gotten higher in your career, how have you juggled those 3 balls, so effectively or not so effectively, and what advice would you give to those that are probably at the beginning of their journey as they hockey stick up in their careers?
The most important thing is that you can't control it all, right? Okay. So things are going to happen that are going to catch you by surprise. You can't plan when you're going to fall pregnant. You can't plan a pandemic, right? You can't plan when you might lose your job and when you might get a promotion. So I think that's probably been one thing that I need to work on, is that I've often tried to have as much control of the situation as possible, and I'm very planned. I'm like, I'm going to get married at this age, have a kid at this age, have this job at that age, stay fit and healthy, connect with my mates. Things are going to happen along that way. They're going to knock you off. So, to keep the balance, you just can't keep things locked away inside. You got to find the people that you can talk to. So it could be your wife, and we speak about these things a lot. It could be a mentor.
Yep.
It could be your boss at work. I think anyone who's within those three buckets need to be aware of what you're going through at any one stage. Because if you've got a good leader who understands what you're going through, they will say to you, Dan, like you got a new kid right now. Go home.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bother you on weekends. And then there's heaps of talk about that at the moment about weekend work.
Yep.
So I think you just got to not hold it in, and that's something again I'm still working on because it kind of festers and festers and festers, and then that's when the lid blows off.
Yeah, and it's often directed at the wrong people.
Yes, unfortunately it is. Yeah.
What have you found worked in terms of strategies for self-management there?
Look, I like to try and keep a fairly positive mindset.
Yep.
I've always been relatively healthy in my diet, in wanting to go out and exercise. I still play OzTag with my mates every week. So I think from a self-management perspective, that's really important. I don't drink much at all anymore.
Yep.
Not that I drank a lot, but I definitely, I don't drink. Which is quite hard. I live with my in-laws right now, and they've got a wine cellar downstairs, and every night my father-in-law is like bringing out a nice bottle of wine. So I've got to practice a bit of self-control there. But yeah, it's just those things.
Yeah, brilliant basics.
Yeah.
I'd love to look at the other side of mentorship, what I would call reverse mentorship, where you're drawing insider wisdom from those that report to you or from those that are more junior. Have you found that's been of value in your career, or would you have an example of where actually that wisdom that you've taken with you has actually come from the most unsuspecting of places?
It's something I want to do more of.
Yep.
I've touched on it, and I've heard it's a great thing, and I probably try and do it with like younger family members.
Yep.
Really young, like in their teens, but it's quite hard to get any insights out of them. But I lean in. You got to get curious. I don't have any examples that come to mind of where I've got that. I probably think that I'm probably still putting a lot of information down and trying to extract information out. Again, something I need to work on. But yeah, I think reverse mentorship is a great thing, especially if you're trying to see what the new trends are coming through, especially when you're trying to kind of stay in touch. Otherwise, you quickly become that oldest person in the room who's not relevant anymore.
And that sort of, I always worried that I become that guy, back in my day, or one of those where the generational chasm starts to create a bit of a myopic context for yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm getting to that point now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, parenthood has this nasty habit of starting to reframe the generational impacts of things.
I know my jokes aren't landing how they used to. So.
Oh, you're a dad. You've got permission. I want to shift gears a little bit, albeit just slightly from one style of, I think, filling your cup in terms of mentorship and building your repository of tools to ongoing education. Obviously, you're an alumni of the Marketing Academy, but again, one of the things that I think is a foundation of great leaders and great professionals and practitioners is the job is never done with learning. And I'd love to get your take. What's your paradigm of learning? Not just, we can talk professionally, personally, or otherwise, but really filling your cup in terms of knowledge and skills.
I would like to do a bit more, I guess, marketing type courses. I feel like it's moving so quickly right now. There's an element of probably needing to spend the next 12 to 18 months leaning back into what's happening in the world of marketing. I have lent heavily into leadership.
Yeah.
At the moment, and the Marketing Academy was fantastic. I think at first I thought it was going to be about marketing, and then I quickly realized it's got nothing to do with marketing. It's all about leadership. So I like listening to podcasts. I think I learn a lot from that. In the mornings, I have like this really short podcasts, like In the Flux is one. I think it's called.
You can shamelessly plug
which is great.
But
just like there's small bite-sized news of what's happening in the world.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. And then there's another podcast called the Acquired Podcast, which I listen to. They're quite long. They're like 2 or 3 hours, but they document the great businesses in our history. So I really like that at the moment. Still a bit of work to do, and actually trying to stay in touch with what's happening in the world of marketing.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned something, and I think that this is one of the really challenging dynamics, particularly for marketers and for senior marketers, CMOs in particular. In a world where tech and industry trends are constantly changing, right? And the rate at which they're changing is increasing year in, year out. How do you strike the right balance between keeping up with the latest developments, but sharpening the axe, so to speak, in terms of the foundational skills of marketing? We love to think that people are really different now. And, I'm often talking to brands and businesses around the glacial pace at which humans actually change. But I'd love to get your perspective on how do you go about striking the right balance and knowing where to invest your time, because obviously you're not going to be able to stay across everything and be equipped to use all of those systems and all of those technologies.
It's a chat I was having with my manager recently, which was, I feel like I need to go and learn a lot more about a particular topic because I feel like I'm losing touch. Then I got this opposing side of me that says, no, I've always believed marketing is just common sense, and there's an element of it we're just making it way too complicated. And again, we're all humans. We're all got busy lives. Like, there's just so much stuff out there. I just challenge it in my own mind. And I just call bullshit on a lot of it.
I don't think you're alone there either.
And, I found myself getting sucked into the metaverse, conversation. And now I know AI is going to be a thing, like, for sure. But where to start, right? And what's the relevance to that to my role? I mean, I was told I got the current role that I'm in, not because of my achievements from a marketing perspective. They just assumed at this level, you've all got it. It was about the person who I was and the leader and being the right fit for the business. And that just got me thinking, hang on a second, like, am I at the stage of my career now where my responsibility is to lead people, to know what my gaps are, and to know who to go to plug those gaps, which is kind of what I'm leaning on at the moment. If I've got a great head of strategy, then, I'm not ashamed to say, I don't quite understand a certain area. I want you to give me a quick, like, nano degree, if you like, on that. So, I mean, I know it's not exactly an answer, but that's kind of where I'm at.
But it's a good bridge into something I would love to explore with you, which is leadership style. I mean, and if this is something that you've been thinking through, particularly given your recent appointment, in this space where, and I think you're right. I think you get to this level where you stop being measured by what Will can do, and you start being measured by your ability to get the best from your people. Have you found that you've had a style in your leadership, and what's your philosophy to getting the most juice from the proverbial squeeze in your people, and to make sure that that they love working for for yourself and for the businesses and the teams that you lead?
My roles have always been quite interesting in that I've had quite a small team that I can directly impact, but actually I've realized my role requires me to work across businesses. So right now at Publicis Groupe, like, I need to work with every single agency. At Telstra, I had to work with all parts of the marketing team. So you really almost found yourself being able to influence people across the business as well, people that you don't see every day. I believe in just being saying things how they are. Like I said it before, no bullshit. Like, don't try and confuse people with jargon. If you don't know something, put your hand up and say, I actually don't understand this topic. I need a bit of help here. I just lean on my values. I mentioned walking in other people's shoes. Humor is a really big one that I use. It's a bit dry. It's probably why you're not seeing a lot of it today.
We'll get there. It's early. But we'll ease into it.
Humor is something which I use in a timely way to help disarm people or situations, especially when you're in a room with execs and people that you don't know. I just find maybe it's a nervous thing. Maybe it's trying to acknowledge the fact there's a nervous energy in the room. So I think humor is probably the one that I go to the most to connect with people and to connect really quickly.
Does it ever get you into trouble?
Yeah, it has.
Yeah?
Yeah, early on.
Can you give us an example?
Early on. Yeah, I mean, I learned pretty quickly about timing your humor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be taken the wrong way. I was at Optus, and we had this really respected head of sponsorship at the time, and I was a graduate at the time, so it was probably a balance of humor and also, naive and whatnot. I made a joke in a meeting, and I thought it was coming from a good place. She pulled me aside later and kind of had a word to me and said, I don't think you're taking this seriously enough. This is a very serious topic. If you're going to be working here, you want to make sure that, you're going to apply yourself. And I had that oh shit moment going. I was honestly like, my intent wasn't to offend. I actually was just trying to lighten up a bit. It was all a bit serious. But yeah, it just got me thinking, like, from that point, like, you need to time it properly.
Maybe build a bit of an understanding of context, right?
Yeah.
Mate, well, you're in good company, as I said. I think I fundamentally, I think that culture and humour are incredibly important in building exceptional teams. What's the sort of culture that you like to create within your teams?
I think it is one where we're almost like mates, we're almost friends. So to the point where you've got each other's back no matter what. I got my team's back. I won't be the kind of leader who tries to take credit for their work. I think that's really, really important. Mention humour. So it's a team that doesn't take themselves too seriously, but they know when to apply themselves.
Yep.
I'm all about, doesn't matter 9 to 5 or the times that you work, as long as you got good judgment and your judgment tells you, okay, we've actually got to all rally around something right now, or judgment, when you get that feeling in your gut, when you know something's not right and you got to call it out. So a team that is not afraid to put their hand up and say, Will, like something's not right here. I think I'm going to need your help.
Yeah, discretionary effort. When I hear you say that, that there are times when you're going to ask for a level of transcendent effort, and hopefully the swings and roundabouts they've been able to take some time back when they need it, and vice versa when you need them to lean in and swarm.
Correct. I mean, if my team want to go for a swim at lunch or the gym in the afternoon or whatever, I'm totally cool with that. Equally, that goes both ways. There'll be times when it's like you said, guys, like now we've got to push a bit, and they're okay with that because they know the pressure will drop off again.
What are the sorts of skills that you hire for in a team like that? If you're building a team that where that culture is really going to thrive, what are you looking for in your up-and-coming leaders?
Looking for people that are really open to feedback.
That's a great one. I love that.
So that's really important, and people who really just want to grow and get better. I think if you've got those two things, then, I mean, there's not much more you can really ask for. Having that growth mindset to that point are the two key things.
I think that is the near perfect answer. I think they complement each other perfectly, an ability to really lean in and have a constant thirst for learning. And then if you can couple that with, an authentic hunger for feedback to shape the path, I reckon that's your secret weapon.
Yeah, I don't think you need anything else really. Like
you can train skills, you can't train attitude.
Exactly.
When have you gotten it wrong?
Spoke about judgment before, about the importance of having good judgment. We actually wrote a book about this in the Marketing Academy, the little book of big fuck ups. That's what it's called. I spoke about a time when I was at Telstra, brand new to Telstra, head of sports sponsorship. It had some pretty big, meaty sponsorships in there. One of them had been partners for 30 plus years, so pretty big, fairly political. And I could tell that it was going a bit south, like maybe this partnership might not get renewed. And I'd moved into a new team, had a new director, so 2 up, and just hadn't really built much of a rapport with that director. One of those really, it's work, right? There was no open door policy, or you felt like there was no open door policy. So I just wasn't bringing this to his attention. And then one night he got the call from this partner saying it's about to go south, and he just yelled at me across the room saying, Will, get here now. And he just roasted me saying, did you know about this? Why didn't you light a fire under me? He goes, when these things happen, he goes, you got to light a fire, under us. And I felt like absolute shit, like I got caned, and I didn't feel like that before. What it taught me was, firstly, if no one's paying attention, which they weren't, then light a fire. But on the flip side, it just got me thinking how important it is as a leader to have that relationship with your team where they feel comfortable to be able to come to you and tell you an issue and don't hide it. Or it was almost like a fear culture, even though it probably wasn't done intentionally. And it may have been a bit of me inside my head as well. So I just mismanaged that whole thing.
What a great learn, though. I love that what you've taken from that was also what you wanted to carry with you as a leader. All right, I want to, as we sort of get to the pointy end of this, I want to talk about the road ahead, and what you think, a bit of reflection, but also crystal balling, if we may. What do you think the critical skills and qualities for senior marketers over the next 5-10 years are going to be, right? Knowing what you know now and seeing where you've come from, and then looking, toward the road ahead. Are we at this sort of step change in terms of what's required for brilliant marketers and agency practitioners, or is it back to basics?
From a marketing practitioner perspective, I don't think the basics have ever gone. I think it's always been back to the core fundamentals of marketing, and all these new things, they all fit into one of those boxes. So whether you're just trying to create, mental availability, awareness, consideration, purchase, it's all the same. The only thing that changes is the tools that we use to be able to achieve that. So I don't think anything's going to change there, and it hasn't for a long time. From a leadership perspective, I do think we are at a shift. Like, I mean, if you look at all the conversations from a macro environment, people are talking about back to the office, people are talking about what young people want now. So I think you see programs like the Marketing Academy, and then I get to meet people who are doing it and want to be in it every year. And you can really clearly see those people who have got it, who understand I'm bringing my whole self to work, and they just excel. And those who are just so obsessed by the work, they burn themselves out, they burn their teams out. And I just don't think there's going to be a place for that in the future.
I hope so.
Me too.
If you could go back to 20-year-old Will and give him 3 pieces of advice, knowing what you know now, what would they be?
I want to say, like, slow and steady wins the race.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Like, don't be overzealous and over eager. I sometimes think that maybe I've taken too long to get to where I'm at right now, but I think the way that I've got here has been relatively smooth, if you know what I mean. Where if I kind of pushed it too far, that's just one thing. Like, yes, I don't know if that's actually a good piece of advice, but I just feel like,
mate, the advice you give yourself, it's not right or wrong.
Just put your head down, work hard. I would say to try and keep your mentors or have mentors throughout your career. I think one thing that I probably did miss out on was about 10 years of a good mentor in the middle there. And the other one was, just keep on having fun. Like, don't take things so seriously. That's a big one of mine. Like, we're here for a short time, really, and you just want to have fun, even when times aren't great. Like, try and give everyone perspective, try and lift everyone out of that situation. Yeah, I mean, they're the 3 things that come
I love
to
that.
mind.
I think that that's a very balanced, very unfiltered answer, right? Because you're right. I think from what at least I can see, we've all come out the back of what has been a really tumultuous few years with this sort of question around how much of my life do I want defined by my career. And I think great leaders are going to understand that tension is going to play out across generations in a meaningful way, and that's not going to go away. And I think you're right. I think from what I can hear, those that work for you would be lucky to have you as their leader. But mate, thank you for coming and having a chat. I really do appreciate it. And for those looking for a mentor, mate, we are
up on LinkedIn.
but Will, thank you so much. I really have enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Dan. Me too.